Jake Boritt will present The Gettysburg Story, America's greatest battle as you've never seen it before. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jake. He is a documentary filmmaker whose latest work, The Gettysburg Story, will be broadcast on public television this year, shedding new light on the Battle of Gettysburg with high-definition aerial and time-lapse cinematography. His previous film, Budapest to Gettysburg, explores the story of his father, Dr. Gabor Boritt, a world-renowned Lincoln and Civil War scholar, who returned to Hungary to find his roots in the tyranny of Hitler and Stalin. It was selected for the 2007 Independent Filmmaker Project Independent Film Week and was a Point of View finalist. Mr. Boritt also wrote and produced the best-selling audio tour, The Gettysburg Story, Battlefield Auto Tour, in 2010. He was raised on a Civil War farm here in Gettysburg that served as a stop on the Underground Railroad and a Confederate hospital during the battle. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jake Boritt.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Jake Boritt. So we're going to start off with a little bit of video here. So this is a film, The Gettysburg Story. So please look at your monitors, listen to the sound. And William, can we play the first clip? Story. And so you're going to see a lot of aerial cinematography from drones, motion control time lapse, and this is sort of a trailer that's giving you some sense of the battle through the sky. All right, we can just pause it there. Sorry about the lack of audio there. Hopefully we'll get that worked out in a second. So what we intended to do with this project, again, it's called The Gettysburg Story, was really show the battle in a new way that hadn't been done before. Now, Gettysburg's a 150-year-old story. It's been told in just about every media that's existed since 1863. So you start with woodcuts, sketches, the famous photographs, of course, paintings. We've all seen the cyclorama painting here. And every art form since that point. Black and white silent films, TV shows, TV miniseries, novels, what have you. It has been told in sort of every format. And so a lot of people said when I started to work on this project, why do you need to do Gettysburg again? And so the real challenge with this was to try to show it in a new way. And that's what we set out to do. I grew up in Gettysburg, and my father, Gabor Boritt, who I'm sure some of you are familiar with, was a professor at Gettysburg College, a historian, written a lot of books on Lincoln and the Civil War. And so I grew up around a lot of this in a Civil War hospital, historic house on Marsh Creek, just a couple miles from here. I live in New York City now, but Gettysburg's always been part of me. And so we came back to get going on this. We were working with public television. The film will be broadcast in the fall around the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address to correspond with that event. And how do you do this differently? And there's been some wonderful things done, and there's some terrible things done on Gettysburg. And I'm sure you're familiar with Ron Maxwell's film Gettysburg, the Ken Burns series. And why even try to do something? Haven't they already done it? But what we kept saying is, I mean, those films are amazing, but they also were done before the internet existed. And so how can we do this in a new way to do it for a new generation? And so we started to explore some of the technologies. In 2010, I worked with my father and the actor Stephen Lang to produce a new auto tour. So this is how the project really began for me professionally. And what we resulted in the summer of 2010 was a battlefield auto tour, which is all audio, a book, and with about 70-some pages with maps and all sorts of images of the battle, and then 3 hours of audio taking you around the national park, telling you the story. Very good history. We work with some very good historians, starting with my dad, Scott Hartwig, and a lot of other wonderful Gettysburg experts. I'm sure a few of you may be in the audience right now. And so that turned into an audio tour. And as a filmmaker, I'm working on this tour. I'm out on the battlefield, and it's really the first time I've ever professionally studied the battle. Learned a lot, realized how little I actually knew about it, and began thinking of it in a cinematic way. How can you do this story on the screen? And as I'm working on the auto tour, writing, sitting on Warfield Ridge, sitting on Oak Hill, sitting at the high water mark, sitting at Little Round Top, writing, coming up with ways to tell this story dramatically, I'm really seeing a film. And then I had to figure out the technology to capture this. Around that time, I was doing another film project with public television, and they were asking, well, what's next? This is a couple years ago, and I knew that 2013 wasn't far away, and if there was ever a time to do a film about Gettysburg, it might be nice to have it out this summer. And so about two and a half years ago, we began the process of figuring out how to tell the Gettysburg story in a new way. The first idea was to really helicopters, an aerial view, almost an aerial tour of the battlefield. And as we explored it, we realized, well, that would be nice, but frankly, for safety reasons and legal reasons, you can only get to about 500 feet above the battlefield. And with Gettysburg, although it's a beautiful landscape, it's a very human story, so you really want to get closer to that. So we started to explore other ways to get a more dramatic cinematography of the battlefield. And that's when we came upon aerial drones. This is a very new technology. I know the name drones is very ominous, and people relate it to all sorts of difficult and bad things, but from the standpoint of shooting with a camera, it's spectacular. So this is, again, a rapidly developing new area of technology. An aerial drone is, you could roughly maybe this big. You can almost get your arms around it. It has 6 or 8 rotors. It has a stabilized platform on it, a gimbal mount, electronic gyro stabilization, and on the bottom is mounted a HD camera. And so we contacted a couple companies, one out of Lancaster called Flying Media, and then the one we primarily worked with ended up being Free Fly Cinema from the West Coast. And began talking to them, how can we do this? How can we tell the story of the battlefield? About a year ago, in June 2012, we brought in Free Fly Cinema, which is 2 guys, a cinematographer working the camera on a remote control, and then the pilot working the helicopter on a camera. And so we spent about 8 to 10 days shooting this project. We got up very early in the morning, and one, the light is best then, and so we really wanted to get amazing light. 2, the battlefield is much emptier. I'm sure many of you visit the battlefield countless times, and if you go to Little Round Top at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever, it's going to be crowded. Same with the high water mark, same with the Pennsylvania Memorial, same with the Virginia Memorial, and so forth. And so our goal was really to capture the landscape, capture the battlefield without people on it. Now, the National Park was extremely gracious. Bob Kirby and his staff allowed us to do this, gave us the permissions to fly a drone and do all sorts of other crazy technology on the battlefield to get this story on camera. But they weren't going to close it down. It was just against their regulations to close it down to the visitor. And so it was open. So we were up very early, literally 4:30 in the morning, getting out on the battlefield, first lights coming up. Anyone that shoots photography or video knows the light is best early or late in the day. So we were getting great light, empty battlefield. And then we just went to town shooting Little Round Top, Devil's Den, going all over. We had a script. I'd worked on a script, but it was sort of a rough outline. And after about 8 to 10 days, we had dozens of hours of footage of the battlefield that had never been shot before. The technology really didn't exist, and certainly the national park had never given permission to someone to do it. And so we had gotten that portion done. As we were developing this whole idea of aerial drone cinematography, I came across another really cutting-edge technology, motion control time-lapse. And you saw some of that. Perhaps you've seen some of the trailers online. That's using a digital still camera. And what that allows you to do is move the camera very slowly, taking an image every 5 or 10 seconds. And in doing that, you get an image, and then maybe 5, 10 seconds later, you get another image. The camera is moving on a track very slowly. Sometimes these shots take 6 or 8 hours. In the course of doing that, you produce maybe 10 or 15 seconds of actual usable video. And then once you get all these images, you speed it up in the editing software, and it achieves the effect of time-lapse. So that's where you see the sun moving very rapidly through the sunset. That's where you see the clouds moving ahead. And another advantage of these new digital cameras is that there's such low light sensitivity that you can actually see the stars. This is something, again, that is a product of the new digital cinema and was not a possibility even a few years ago, really. And so we were able to get on the battlefield, which is another thing that the National Park Service allowed us to do, permission to shoot on the battlefield after hours. So we spent a lot of nights on the battlefield with our camera equipment, very slowly taking shots of these iconic, historic spots. And what the Astro Cinematography does, you set up the same idea, the camera on a rail moving very slowly. Your exposures tend to be longer, so you're getting literally images of the stars with, for example, Devil's Den in the foreground or the copse of trees. And then you're literally shooting over a long enough period of time that the Earth is rotating under the stars. And in the course of 5, 6, 7 hours, you'll see the entire night sky pass overhead. Really, the Earth rotating underneath the stars. And this is just sort of stunning cinematography that, one, hadn't been done before of this really iconic, very special place. I don't need to tell any of you that. If you're here, you know what Gettysburg means. But also it had such a sense of place, and it was so tied to this very distinct, crucial human story in American history. And so we started to get all this imagery and collecting it, and kind of the way a documentary works is you get all your images and then you figure out how to put it together in post-production in the edit. And that was almost a surprising challenge. Once we got the permission, we knew the technology was going to be hard, that we'd be able to do it. And then when we started to get into the editing of the film, it really came down to how do you tell this story in a new way. Our film has no reenactors in it. Our film has no historians on camera speaking. Our film has very, very few archival still photos. And so we kind of very purposely did not want to use all the traditional elements that you see in a historical Civil War Gettysburg documentary. We wanted to stick exclusively, as much as we could, to this new kinds of technology. And so that became a new way, how do you tell the story? I had a script, my editor, Ira Maestrich, and I sat down, we're really working with it quite a bit. And it led to quite a few challenges. And so literally I said, let's throw out the script, and we know the story well enough, let's just tell the story visually. Traditionally in a historical documentary, you write a script, and then you fill the images in to meet the words. We kind of did it in an opposite way. We threw in the images. Now, we knew the story pretty well. We understood the history well, so we understood the significance of the images we were looking at. And so when we saw that stone wall at the angle, we knew that stone wall is special. You can't just use that stone wall anywhere. And so we were very, very, as much as we could, precise about using the exact locations where these events happen. We didn't shoot this film in South Africa. We didn't shoot this film on a backlot in Hollywood. We didn't shoot this film even in Hagerstown or even just down the road. We shot this film on the exact spot, still beautifully preserved by the National Park. And so we wanted to tell the story with the exact place as best we could. Now, I'm not going to get in some debates where certain things happened, certain things didn't happen, and that's kind of part of being a Civil War buff, is to argue about what's true or not. But working with good historians, we made pretty sure that we had good historical accuracy for what we were doing. And so we basically cut a visual film with a rough outline, and then wrote the script, wrote the words to match the imagery to tell the story of Gettysburg. Again, we'd already done the auto tour, so we had a pretty good sense of the characters, the quotations, and so forth that we wanted to use. And that led to, all right, we got this. Now, Stephen Lang, I'm sure almost all of you are familiar with Stephen Lang from his work as Pickett in Gettysburg, of course, Stonewall Jackson, and gods and generals, and then Colonel Quaritch and avatars. I always say he keeps losing to armies of blue people in his pictures. And so he had agreed. I mean, this is a slight tangent, but in 2010, when my father and I started working on the Auto Tour, this is in the middle, really right at the beginning of the Avatar madness. You know, an actor works his whole life, and he's been a pretty successful actor, but then Avatar hits, and he becomes a world, you know, basically a world celebrity because he's the star of the biggest movie of all time, the highest grossing movie of all time internationally. He's on an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf with Sigourney Weaver and Jim Cameron. We write him an email. Hi, Slang, would you mind being the voice of this new auto tour we're doing? Within 24 hours, midst of this Avatar madness, he writes back saying yes. He loved working on the project. He loves Gettysburg, and he signed on. As soon as we were done, what else are we doing? This film comes up, he's the voice of that. So worked with Slang to really do it. And I really think there's very few actors that have the ability to sort of span all the characters. We didn't do different voices. We really relied very much on Stephen Lang's ability as an actor to carry the film. And so he's doing everything from General Lee and Abraham Lincoln to Jenny Wade. And so that's quite a range. And that's a stretch for him, I will grant you that. But he pulls it off, and I hope that you'll be pleased with the results if you haven't seen the film already. And so we recorded it, and then we worked in the pictures and the audio, and then really the film started to come together. And then it becomes a little bit of, all right, is this working? Is this not working? And so the term that you often use in making a film or making a documentary, and it's sort of a terrible term, but it's called killing your babies, because there's inevitably parts, scenes, characters that you love so much that you don't want to see go, but they don't belong in your film, and they need to go. Our film is for public television. It has to be 56 minutes long. And so that's an extremely short amount of time to tell the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. I mean, there's how many thousands of books, how many hours of film, what have you, how many lectures. So it's an infinite subject. And our goal was really to tell the story of Gettysburg in a succinct way. And that was very hard. But I believe we managed to do it. And so, again, when we were working on it, we knew we were going to get imagery that we hadn't seen before. We weren't sure if the storytelling elements were going to work. And so one example is that we had this, you know, Gettysburg's a gorgeous place, and sort of one of the fundamental ironies of it is it's the most beautiful place on earth. There's certainly one of them, yet it's also one of the most horrible places, the bloodiest place in American history. And how do you sort of square that? And the footage that we have, you've seen some of it already, is just sort of beautiful and bucolic. And so really that ended up being the script, Steve Lang, the sound effects, the music, and really adding the intensity of drama into the footage that, you know, by looking at a gorgeous field with mist and the sun rising and the rays going through the mist, it may not speak to the number of people that died climbing up Little Round Top trying to take that position, or Patty O'Rourke getting a shot right into him almost the instant he gets into his position on Little Round Top, and so forth. And so there's certain things about Gettysburg that you want to capture the beauty, but you also want to communicate the suffering and the killing that happened here and how fundamental that was to the battle and to American history. And so I guess I want to show you a little bit. Is the video working? Okay, so we're going to play the behind the scenes. So if there's no audio, I'll just kind of narrate it for you. But you'll be able to see the pictures. The second one.
Gettysburg Story. Public television to broadcast the film.
So I'm going to lean over the podium and try to tell you a little bit about what's going on. That's just me talking. You can see that here. Okay, and so now you're just seeing this is over the town, and basically what we want to do, capture the story of the battle. Now, you recognize these faces. This is General Lee, and what the aerial drone lets you do is get up to these perspectives that have never been seen before, because the technology, again, did not exist until a few years ago. And so here, you know, very familiar, the National Cemetery, but we never had a shot quite like that. That's me. I grew up here in the battlefield, and that's the farm that I grew up on, just about 2.5 miles from here. There's my dad, who's in the audience someplace. I'm sure some of you know him, Boritt. And he came out, was a historical advisor on the project, along with a lot of other great people. and was really, again, helping us make this the best history it can be. Because we've all seen movies, Gettysburg movies, that kind of shy away from accurate history at times. We shot from helicopters. So this is a Bell Jet Ranger. We have a Red Epic side mounted in there. And you're seeing there's Pennsylvania Memorial and Big Round Top, misty battlefield morning. And so again, this is from a helicopter, and a lot of it was just luck, getting out there the right day when the battlefield looks like that. And so it was really fortunate that, you know, if you get the right weather, you can do it. Now you're about to see a little bit of the aerial drone. This is really one of the more cutting-edge pieces of technology. You can see it's a relatively small camera there going over General Reynolds. And that gives you a sense of what I'm seeing, and that's the kind of shot that you can get from it. Now this is motion-controlled time-lapse, a digital still camera, DSLR, and it moves along a rail. It can go up and down, back and forth. Here at the Jenny Wade House, and the camera takes a shot and really allows you to kind of very slowly get the time moving. We're at the Rose Farm right here. And again, this is a sense of what it looks like as time's passing. And you'll recognize this guy, Stephen Lang, of course. I can't say enough about how generous he was. He's a very busy guy. He's constantly getting movie offers. And, you know, whether it be Colonel Quaritch in Avatar, Pickett in Gettysburg, it's kind of an iconic figure. And if you walk around Stephen Lang in Gettysburg, it's kind of overwhelming at times how much he's beloved here. And there's the Peace Light, one last shot of the drone. That's Hugh and Tab controlling it. That's what we're seeing from our monitor, and that's the kind of shot you end up with. And pretty sure you've never seen that perspective before. And so there's Warren on Little Round Top, giving you a sense of what you can do with this new kind of technology, but you still need the good history. You need to still need good dramatic storytelling to make it worthwhile. And so once we got the imagery, it was really very much up to how do we make it exciting. Okay, so we can pause it. I'll flip this back around. And so that gives you a little bit of sense of some of the technology that we use to do this. I guess we can show another one of the scenes in a little bit. I also want to talk a little bit of how we funded this film. A fundamental challenge with any documentary, any independent documentary, is money. How do you get funding? And perhaps some of you are part of our Kickstarter campaign. Now, you can go to a network, you can go to the History Channel, you can go to try to get money through other places, but frankly, they want to do what they want to do commercially. We wanted to do something different that was very unproven. Try this new technology out. And so that was really our goal, and so we knew we had to do this independently. So we had some money from some people that supported us through public television, through foundation, people that frankly just love Gettysburg. But we needed some more funding because we wanted to develop some new maps that we're going to show you in just a second, as well as some other aspects of it. And so we used Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a all-or-nothing crowdfunding platform. It's online. It allows you to reach out via social networks like Facebook or Twitter, via email, via telephone, however you can get it out there. And you set a goal, you put your project out there, and then you see if people respond to it. If you don't reach your goal, you get nothing. Our goal was originally $25,000, and within a week, we meet that goal. And so people were putting in $5, $10, $20, $35, and at a certain level, you start to get rewards for that. So for a $35 contribution, you've got the DVD and so forth. One person, we didn't even know him. He put in $10,000 into the project. And then he kept going and going, and ultimately we raised about $66,000, plus another thousands of dollars, another $40,000 more than that through people that contributed through public television.
Of American
found out
history.
about the Kickstarter
Best known for the movie Avatar, in which he played Colonel Quaritch. Probably.
That allowed us to really kind of up the production value, pay some of the people that were working on the project, like Andrew Mambo, the co-producer of the film, was in the front row right here, and Ira, I mentioned, a couple other folks, and really have us just really go even further and harder with it. And also took a little longer, made it a little tighter on the deadline. And so I can't say much about how this film was in no small part funded by Civil War people, Gettysburg Bus, people that love this place, love the idea of telling the story in a new way. And so not only was the technology that we used innovative, but so was the way that we funded this film and making use of all this new stuff that's been coming out in the past few years. And so that kind of gives you an idea of how we approached it. I'm going to show you one more scene. Unfortunately, I don't know if the audio is going to work, so I'll kind of narrate it. I apologize. I am not Stephen Lang, so you're not going to hear the music or anything, but we'll be able to see, again, some of the imagery. And you're also going to see at least one example of the digital animated 3D maps that we did, where we literally took aerial footage, animated troop movements, and matched it with aerial footage of the exact spot on the battlefield so that you could see, for the first time, I think, ever, troops moving in formation across the ground. So we're going to see the beginning of day 2, which is essentially when Hood's division advances from Warfield Ridge towards Devil's Den and then eventually Little Round Top. So I don't think we're going to have any audio. I apologize for that. But we can, if we can play, William, the shot. Yeah, third one. And I will narrate, unless I don't need to.
Longstreet is unhappy with Lee's plan for assaults on the Union left. He spends much of the day getting his troops into position. Unhappy, too, is Union 3rd Corps Commander Dan Sickles. Though a courageous soldier, Dan Sickles has a sordid past. A corrupt congressman, he murdered his wife's lover. His political connections, not his military ability, gain him command of the 3rd Corps. The Union left flank is supposed to extend south on top of this rocky hill, Little Round Top. Sickles abandons his assigned position for one he thinks is stronger, moving out to the Peach Orchard and Devil's Den, leaving the high ground of Little Round Top undefended. At 4 p.m., ready at last, Longstreet sends in John Bell Hood's division. In front of his Texas brigade, General Hood gives the command, "My brave Texans, forward and take those heights." We moved as fast as we could. Off went blankets, knapsacks, yelling and screaming, says Texan John West. Across an open field, over a marshy branch, over a stone fence, and up a very rugged and rocky hill. Yankee sharpshooters on the higher mountains. On we went, yelling, whooping. We rush on the batteries. "For God's sake, men," pleads the Union artillery commander in vain, "don't let them take my guns away from me." Up and into these jumbled rocks of Devil's Den charged the Texans. Fighting as chaotic as these giant boulders. Vicious fighting. Rebels overwhelm the Yankees and capture the position. The rebel flag rises atop Devil's Den. An hour into the fighting, the rebels believe they have taken the Union flank. But rising before them is Little Round Top. Just before the rebels begin their attack, Union General Gouverneur Warren rides up here to Little Round Top. He is horrified. It is undefended. If the rebels take this rocky hill, they will control the battlefield. Warren sees thousands of rebels minutes away.
Thank you. Well, it's too much audio now. When it rains, it pours. Okay, well, thank you, William and team, for getting that together so I don't have to take Stephen Lang's place, because that's not going to be favorable to me. So anyways, that gives you a sense of two scenes really, Devil's Den and Little Round Top. And when you get the permission, you get out there with nobody on it, early morning hours, to be able to really show the battlefield. It's really a singular place in this country, really in the world, I would imagine. And I don't know any other place that quite has the landscape that's so stunning, this central historical story of human beings, you know, on the best or the worst day of their life, and then so beautifully preserved, along with all the monuments and all the statues. And that was another decision that we kind of came across as we were working on the project. How do you tell the story? We're not going to have actors, we're not going to have reenactors, we're not going to have historians on camera, we're not going to have very many photographs. So we really relied on the landscape, including the statues. And so there was an example of General Warren. I mean, is there a better statue that tells a story than General Warren about what happened on that hill 150 years ago? And, you know, thankfully for that, that really gave us a storytelling element to use in the film. Okay, so we're going to run out of time. I'm going to talk about one last aspect of the film, which was the music, which is not the visual part, but this, we're going to just play that song, William, that you were just played a little bit of. You're going to hear just a small snippet of a song called Jenny Get Your Hoe Cake Done. It's by a band called the 2nd South Carolina String Band, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Very authentic Civil War reenactor band. And they're playing this song that I believe you're about to hear. And so what I'm going to show you now in just a minute is a scene that we did. This is the beginning of Barksdale's Charge. So we took this song, played probably as authentically as it can be by the 2nd South Carolina, and then used very modern music production technologies, almost taking hip-hop music making technologies of creating samples, looping songs, and then creating a new type of music that very much references not only the historical style of music, but in this case, an exact song that there's historical evidence that this is what the Mississippi men were singing when they marched. And so we're just going to play one more scene. This is Barksdale's Charge on the afternoon of July 2nd. I happen to grow up in the hospital where Barksdale.
Longstreet's Confederates continue attacking the Union lines. Ready to fight is General William Barksdale of Mississippi, a fire-eating politician, a slave owner who vehemently supports the creation of the Confederacy. Barksdale's Mississippians aim for the middle of the Union line. Sickles' men at the Peach Orchard. Barksdale bellows, "Onward, brave Mississippians, for glory!" His brigade of 1,400 explodes out of the woods, their general leading across these fields on his white horse, his silver hair shining in the afternoon sun. The two lines crash together at this peach orchard. The Union lines explode like overripe fruit. Union lines are collapsing. General Sickles tries to gain cover behind this barn. A cannon shot hits him in the leg. He is carried from the field, his leg amputated. One of Hancock's staff says, "The loss of his leg is a great gain to us, whatever it may be to him."
Okay, so you may be not going to hear the music that well, but if you hear in the theater tonight, the Visitor Center, it's also playing at the Majestic, or you can hear it on the DVD. It'll give you a sense of the music. But anyway, so I just wanted to say thank you. It's great to be here. Before we finish up, I just wanted to have Andrew Mambo stand up. He's a co-producer of the film. Andrew's from Canada originally, knew very little about the Civil War. was working in film and wanted to get into this project, and ended up becoming the co-producer of it, and spent some pretty long nights and days tirelessly on this battlefield, as well as working on the editing and a lot of other aspects. So thank you, Andrew. My wife Heather is here. Heather was the one that did the original maps in the Heather Ross did the original maps in the Auto Tour, which we then adapted with 3D artists and animation to produce the maps that you see that then have a lot of dynamic. And I think my dad, Gabor Boritt, might be in, oh, he's in the way back right there. And so he asked me to say that what a coincidence. I've known Ed Bars since I was, as Ed Bars will tell you, since I was this tall. And now Ed, I think, is probably around 90 years old, still doing it and doing it well. And it's a great honor to be, you know, from a little kid to standing on the same podium as Ed Bars a few minutes after him is pretty spectacular. So anyways, I'll be sitting down in the visitor center at the store if you want to come and say hi and see the Auto Tour, see the DVDs. We have them there, and happy to talk to you. I really appreciate this. And my name's Jake. Thank you. And I'll take a few questions right now, right? So we have time for 4 or 5 questions maybe. There's a woman right here.
Yeah, one right here.
Yeah, come up.
Jake,
Yes.
on your disc, do you have outtakes and things like that?
On the DVD, there's a few outtakes. We're actually talking about doing kind of the jumbo version. A lot of people have asked about more footage, so I think by November we're going to release kind of a 2 or 3 hour version of a lot more footage. The film's only 56 minutes long. There was no way we could get all our footage in it, so we're going to do the Gettysburg aficionados. It's people that just want to stare at beautiful Gettysburg footage. So stay posted for that. We'll have mail sign-up lists in the store. If you want to sign up for that, you can learn more, or go to GettysburgStory.com or our Facebook page at Gettysburg Story, and you can learn about that as well. So on the DVD, there is a behind the scenes, a little featurette. You saw some of it here, how we did it with the drones and the motion control. There's even a scene showing us how we did a photo match with Tim Smith, the battlefield guide and historian, on the Devil's Den sharpshooter wall. We did a time-lapse matching the famous photograph of the dead sharpshooter, quote-unquote sharpshooter, and a couple other features in there, too. There was another question a woman had. Oh, maybe she's gone.
She got scared.
She got scared. Okay.
Anybody?
Sure. Any other questions?
She's going to try.
Oh, she's right there.
When you mentioned the type of photography that took about 6 or 8 hours in slow motion and you got stills, what examples should we look in the film to see that?
So the question was asking about the photography, the cinematography that took 6 to 8 hours. That's a time lapse, motion control time lapse. And so a lot of those shots you'll see when the sun is moving up in the sky very rapidly. The shot at the beginning of the Barksdale shot where you see the sun rising behind the Mississippi Memorial, that's a time lapse. You'll see a lot of Astro Cinematography, which has never been done in Gettysburg before. That's when you see, it looks like the stars moving overhead. It's the Earth rotating underneath the stars. And so that gives you a sense of it. There's a lot of shots. One of the inventors of the technology at Dynamic Perceptions, who we worked with, said that he's never seen more footage shot for a project in time-lapse than we did on this. We have a lot of that couldn't make it into the final cut. Right here,
Both
Leslie.
daytime and nighttime. Perspectives that have never been seen before.
No?
Yes, now? Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place in Gettysburg after doing all of this? Did
My favorite place in
become
Gettysburg?
a special place to you during filming?
Well, I grew up in Gettysburg, so I grew up on a farm on the banks of Marsh Creek. It was built in the late 1700s. It was both a stop on the Underground Railroad. Basil Biggs, who ended up burying bodies in the cemetery after the battle, he lived there, fled. Free black man fled when the Confederates came into Pennsylvania, and then it became General Barksdale's, his brigade. That was their hospital. And so General Barksdale was perhaps the most fervent supporter of slavery and that aspect of the South. And so it's a sort of amazing juxtaposition of these two characters, central to understanding Gettysburg, but couldn't be more polar opposites. And So that's where I grew up. So that's very special. As far as on the national park, I mean, I love a lot of places. Obviously, Little Round Top, Devil's Den. I remember very clearly the first time I went there as a 4-year-old boy when my family just moved here. And I was up on Little Round Top, and I was like, wow, look at these great boulders to climb on. And my big brother, who was 5 years older than me, said, there's even bigger boulders down there. And I couldn't believe it. We went to Devil's Den, and it's like, wow. And I think maybe a unique spot is the Plum Run Swale, which is where Plum Run goes between the Kadori farm, the Trossel farm, and Cemetery Ridge. And it's where the 1st Minnesota on the evening of day 2 charges. 262 men. We didn't show the scene here, but it's a central part of the film. 262 men charge into roughly 1,400 Confederates to hold a gap in the line so Hancock can bring up more men. And it's probably one of the least visited parts of the battlefield, but really it's kind of amazing because it's thick. It's as Mamba will tell you, there's a lot of ticks in there, and it gets pretty gnarly, pretty gnarly at this time of year. But you're there, and it's just, this is where these men, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that the position was tenuous, that if the Confederates break through, that could be the end of the Union line, that could be the end of the battle, that could be the end of the war in the United States. And so these 262 men know full well what they're doing. They charge, and it's debatable, but it's 80% casualties or close to it. And so I think 46 or 47 men come back unscathed from that charge out of 262. And so that sort of sums up what the sacrifices that were made on this battlefield. And that place is, you can get down there and you'll be all by yourself, except for the ticks. So maybe one more question.
Do you have any plans for any other battlefields that you might?
The question is, do we have any plans for any other battlefields? And we don't have any other specific plans. We just finished this one. Literally a couple weeks ago, we had the world premiere on Father's Day at the Gettysburg Festival in the Big Majestic Theater before about 600 people. We've been going nonstop for the 150th, doing Q&As, question and answers, signings and screenings and all this. So it's been kind of nonstop, getting the DVD out and doing all the media and stuff that comes with it. So it's been nonstop. A lot of people have asked us, will we take this technology other places, whether it be to Normandy, whether it to be Little Bighorn, whether it be to Antietam, Vicksburg, etc. And so I would love to do it. It seems to be successful. Audiences are really responding to it. I know the screening here, I believe, is sold out, or with tickets are taken off. And so I would love to keep doing it. Again, fundamental to doing this is having the money to do it and having the permission to do it. So we were able to get the permission to do it from the National Park. We can continue to do that. Then we just need to raise the funding to do it and work with public television. So be in touch. If you love this kind of stuff, sign up on our mail list or find us on Facebook. Go to our website, sign up for the mail list there at gettysburgstory.com, and we'll be in touch because we'd love to do more of it. And it's, it would be wonderful to keep a new way of telling history for our generation and future generations, because this story is going to be around forever. As long as there's a United States, as long as we care about democracy, people will come to this place, and that was the goal, was to interpret it in a new way. And I hope that we've achieved that. So thank you very much. I'm going to go sit down inside at the Visitor Center bookstore, so come and see me. Appreciate it.